Anyone who follows Jesus lives a better life. And he says, come, I will give you a whole new life and a whole new way of life.
All right, what a great time to be with our denomination and a part of the Alliance. I so appreciate Darren's leadership, and I'm very humbled. Darren, thank you for trusting me with this opportunity to share tonight. And I am probably most surprised and shocked to be here because 40 years ago, I made an application to be a minister in this denomination, and I was flatly rejected. I had done pulpit supply at Alliance churches. I had family at Alliance churches. I would attend Alliance church here and there, but I think I went to the wrong seminary. I went to Dallas Seminary, not CBC. I think I was just not part of the family. But then 4 years ago, when this denomination came knocking at my door, I gave it an initial flat no, a hard no. So I am shocked to be here, and let me explain. I had served at a church in London, Ontario, an incredible church, 20 years. I met my wife there. We had our kids there. We buried a child there, and the church supported us and cared about us and came around us. And after 20 years, I thought maybe it's time for something new. And so I ended up moving to a very nice place, a suburb in St. Louis, Missouri. And friends, St. Louis is one of the best kept secrets on the continent. It's very economical to live. It's incredibly family friendly. The schools were great. The hospitals were fantastic for my family. And I was going to do another 20 years there. That's what I thought. And that was where I was going to retire. My family would stay. We'd be all together. It was going to work out perfectly. In fact, I already had an initial kind of succession plan worked out. And then God did the most crazy thing. He says, Terry, I think it's time to move. And I'm like, but God, I'm like in my 60s, I'm comfortable. No, it's time to move. And so I thought, I'm not sure I really heard God right. So I just began to look. And you know, sometimes in this day and age, you work with headhunters and people. And so I asked them to kind of like narrow my search to Florida, Texas, or California. And here is my rationale. God and lost people are everywhere, so I'm gonna live at the beach. Why not? And so I was working with a headhunter on an opportunity in Florida. It was, in fact, a church that I'd longed to be a part of, this great church in the center of Orlando, Florida. And I'd had several interviews. And as I was in that process, the search consultant, he says to me, hey, Terry, I've got this great church in Toronto. I think you'd be perfect for it. And I said, well, which one? He said, Bayview Glen. I said, that's a hard no. And I told it, honestly, I said, I'm not even gonna pray about it. It was the first time I had never actually prayed about an opportunity. I said, I'm not gonna pray about it. Like, that's a hard no. And it's like, what kind of search consultant is directionally challenged? That's north. I'm going south, friends. Eventually, it didn't work out. I got the second interview. They moved on with another candidate. And I tried to stay actually where I was. I thought, well, maybe I can just stay here. And then God made it very clear it was time to go. And I thought, I've got to go back. Was working with several search consultants and the same directionally challenged one. And I said, hey, I really do think I need to look a little bit more broadly. And he said, yeah, Bayview Glen. I said, what part of no do you not understand? Said, I'm not going there. Do you know Toronto? Have you ever been? It's like incredibly expensive. I was in my 60s. I don't have time for a 25-year mortgage, friends. That there is incredibly cold. I was wanting to go south. Last winter, the coldest winter on record in Toronto, and there we are. It has this highway that goes east to west through it. I don't know if you've ever been. It's called the 401. Friends, it has 18 lanes, and it's a parking lot. You don't drive the 401. You commit to it and hope you come out the other side. That there was just no way that I was gonna go, no way that I wanted to be there. And this is a lot about me, and I'm sorry, this makes me look like a jerk, I know. It was the smallest church I'd been in. I'm like, I don't want that. And there was this little matter that they rejected me 40 years ago, so why should I say yes? And the search consultant kept saying, no, Bayview Glen, I think you're perfect for Bayview Glen. And I realized, like, when you work with these guys, you have to kind of play their game. I thought, I've got to go through the motions with Bayview Glen because then they'll give me the Florida churches. But they're not going to do that until I go. So I said, yeah, you can send my application in. So they sent my resume to Bayview at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon. By 7 o'clock, they emailed me and said, we want an interview in 10 days. How's that happen? And I'm like, okay. So I went, and initially, I did the interview because I thought, I want to get to Florida. And I was phoning it in. Like the first part of the interview, and the search team, they'll tell you, I was phoning it in. Like the first half was just very nice, but then something hit me. And I was sitting at this table with people, and I thought, I want to work with them. These are incredibly gifted people. And God smacked me on the face. God is not kind and polite to me, I'm sorry. Like, he's like a little rough sometimes when he deals with me. And he said, Terry, this is where you're supposed to be. I'm calling my sons and daughters back to Canada. I'm doing something. This is where you're supposed to be. And I realized at that moment I was Jonah, trying to go to Florida/Tarshish. And God was saying, Toronto. And I realized I had done what I had preached against, that I was asking God to bless my plans instead of stepping in to what he had. And the last 4 years, it's like the most remarkable years. I've had amazing years in ministry, but nothing like these last 4. I get to worship with Derek every Sunday. Like, this is a normal Sunday for us. You can't have him. Lizette, who prayed yesterday for our communion service, she leads our staff prayer every week. You can't have her either. We got Minsu here. One of our elders is playing the electric guitar. If you're stacking an elder board, get a rock and roll guitar player. Like, that's who you really need. And over these past 4 years, God has worked tremendous. I found my home in the Alliance. I'm so glad to be here. You all, many of you in 4 years have become fast friends. Now, why do I tell you this? It's not to say what God has done at Bayview, or not to puff up Bayview, is to say about me that I almost missed the greatest season of my life. Not because I didn't love God, but because I loved comfort more. It's not because I didn't love him. I loved comfort. I wanted the comfortable house, the comfortable lifestyle. I wanted the comfortable beach. I wanted a comfortable church. I wanted a comfortable size. I wanted a comfortable salary. I bet you love comfort too. That you look on social media, everything we have, we look for comfort. And friends, comfort is not just something that makes us feel good. It's not, oh, life is a little easier. It's not like, well, I'm just taking care of things. Comfort is an idol of the heart. And we build our lives around comfort. We are comfort magnets. And comfort is one of the most deceitful idols there is, because comfort disguises itself as virtue. Right, when we take comfort, I'm just like creating a nice environment for us, or I'm just being fiscally responsible, or I'm just trying things that other people would like. We excuse comfort all the time for virtue. And the worst thing is, we don't know we are worshiping the God of comfort until we are one step away from what God wants. And it's in that not taking that next one step, we know we're comfortable. And all week, we have been challenged to double our reach, to double our depth, to reach the next generation, to cast our nets on the other side, to build a pipeline of leaders for the future. And here's my fear. None of that will ever happen if we love comfort more than Jesus. None of it. And my fear is that I will go home, you will go home. With this great conference enthusiasm, we will board the airplane, all excited about what we could do, and we will get home, and comfort will kick in, because comfort will be our God, and we love being comfortable more than we love Jesus. So what's the antidote? How do we deal with that? And as I was praying about it, I was looking at scripture, and God just said, what we need is what Caleb had, a new and different spirit. And you know Caleb in the Old Testament, he and Joshua were called, appointed by Moses to be one of 12 spies that went into the promised land to spy it out. And 10 came back and said, we're not gonna go. And in Numbers 14:24, this is what God says. He says, but my servant Caleb has a different spirit, and he follows me wholeheartedly. Caleb has a different spirit. He does not have an ordinary spirit. He doesn't have a common spirit. He doesn't have a spirit like everybody else. This is never said about Joshua or Moses or David or Abraham. It's only said about Caleb. He has a different spirit. Turn to the person next to you and tell them whether you have a common spirit or a different spirit. What do you have? That's a little uncomfortable, isn't it? Do you have a common, ordinary spirit? And you know where I'm going. Because by the end, I'm gonna challenge us. Are we gonna leave here with an ordinary common spirit or something different? Now, there are only actually about 30 verses about Caleb in all of the Bible. I mean, we see of him as a great person, but only about 30 verses. In 5 of those 30 verses, it says what it says here in Numbers, that he was wholehearted. The Hebrew word is mala, like everything. He was all in, all the chips were in. He was wholehearted in his relationship with God. He never did anything half-hearted, but he was wholehearted. And we're gonna look at Caleb, 3 points in his life, 3 situations where he was completely wholehearted because he would go where no one else was gonna go. He said, I'm gonna go there. He said, I'm gonna stay when everyone else wants to leave. And you know that everybody else is leaving. I'm staying. And he invested heavily in the next generation. He said, that's important. And in order to do that, he had to sacrifice comfort. He had to sacrifice the right to his own timeline. And he had to sacrifice his own legacy for the sake of the next generation. So the first time we see Caleb, and we see him doing that. We see him sacrificing comfort. We find him in Numbers chapter 13. And here is where Moses calls a couple, 12 people to be spies to go in the land. He's like any leader. He says, hey, if we're gonna go, I want you to go. And he calls Caleb to be the spy for the tribe of Judah, the kingly, princely tribe. Now, Caleb is an unlikely choice. First of all, his name. Do you know what his name means? Dog. Not a nice little chihuahua, you know, or a little shih tzu, or a little poodle. It's a dog. It's a mangy junkyard dog who hung around the gates. And so to all you parents who named your children Caleb, you meant well. And I'm sure they'll be okay. Probably. But he was a pit bull. The second thing is we learn that he was the son of Jephunneh. That he was son of Jephunneh, the Jebusite, that he was the son of someone who was an ancestor of Esau. He wasn't from the tribe of Israel. He wasn't a descendant of Jacob. He was a descendant of Esau. He was one of the peoples that were going to get displaced by Israel. He was not one of those initially chosen people. Yes, a descendant of Abraham, but he had somehow become grafted in to the tribe of Judah. Either somehow he got married in, that somehow he became a convert. Maybe he saw what God was doing. And you would look at him and think his past was his liability. He doesn't belong. He's not like them. Like, I didn't go to CBC, I went to DTS. I'm sorry. You don't belong. But our past sometimes is the point. His past was the point. He saw what God could do. He knew what deliverance is. He saw the hope. He saw that there was only one true God, and he wanted to be there. And so they go in, you know the story, these 12 spies go into the land, and they see the most incredible things. They see grapes, right? It takes a couple people to carry them. They see fruit, the land flowing with milk and honey. It's so good. It's what we see as we get ready to leave here. Like, we can reach the next generation. We can fish on the other side. We can see all the good things. We can see what God is going to do. We can raise money. We can do that. We have hope. But then what did they see? They saw the giants. And in verse 28 of Numbers 13, it says, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the Negev, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country. We saw the Anak, we saw the giants. But Caleb was the first to speak up, the pit bull, the junkyard dog. He was the first to say, hey, we can do it. If you look down at verse 30, he said, but Caleb quieted the people before Moses. He said, let's go up at once and occupy it, for we are able to overcome it. Because he saw the giants, and he compared the giants to who? God. He said, they're nothing. See, that's a different spirit. When it sees the problems, it compares the problems not to us or other things, but to God. He said, we saw the horse and rider fall into the sea. We saw all those plagues. We saw the fire and smoke. We have the pillar of fire in the cloud that leads us. Look at what we have. Those giants, the Anak, are nothing. But the people said what? The people said, oh no. In verse 33, there was the Nephilim, the sons of Anak who came from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them. We seem to ourselves to be grasshoppers. They compared the giants to who? Themselves. And they said, we're grasshoppers. Now, my guess is I've used a lot of grasshopper language in my life. I bet you've used a lot of grasshopper language. Sitting in board meeting or staff meeting. Oh, we didn't get enough offering. Oh, people aren't turning out like they used to. Oh, I don't know if the young generation in our town really wants to come. We use a lot of grasshopper language. I don't think we can do that. That's too hard. That's too difficult. That's the God of comfort. That's when the God of comfort, it says, yeah, you don't need it. It's not wise to do it. But something happens, friends, when someone walks into a room and says, I refuse to speak grasshopper language. I want to call us to follow what God has said and know what God can do. And friends, that's our roots. Right? You know the story. 1881, A.B. Simpson was where? He was living the high life in the Presbyterian Church in New York City. He was making, at the time, $5,000 US. That's $200,000 today in comparison. Wouldn't we like that? That's USD, friends. 200,000 USD. But he had a heart. And he walked the streets. And you know the story. There were 100 Italian seamen. And he said to his board, I'm like, why did he go to his board? Ken Draper said he had to. It was a presbytery. Now, why did he go to his board? And he said, can we do it? Can we invite these 100 new believers to come to our church? And there was nothing but grasshopper talk. Oh, it's too hard, too expensive. We can't do it. It's too difficult. And what did our founder do? A.B. Simpson sacrificed all his comfort of a $200,000 USD salary for nothing. He left the church and started with 7 people in a dance hall or something. Our history is founded on our ability to not listen to the grasshoppers, but to sacrifice whatever it takes for the good news of Jesus to reach those who need it. And for Caleb, this was not just speaking up at a meeting. This was not just saying something a little controversial. This was his life. You read the continuation of the story. He keeps saying to people, no, we can do it. We can take the giants. We can have the land. And what happens? They try to kill him. It was his life they were after. So here's my question. What are we willing? What are we willing to sacrifice and give up for the sake of the gospel? I have a pastor friend in Toronto. Pastors a great church. Their church, their constitution of the church is that they have to give away 40% of their annual giving to missions. 40%. And in the last few years, it's been tough. And they've had to lay off some staff and shut some ministries and do some very difficult things. And I was having coffee with him and I said, man, like, why don't you just go back and change the Constitution? Like, why don't you move it to 30%? Like, no one can live on 60%. We know what churches cost. No one can do that. He looked me in the eye. He's not Alliance. I have missionary in my name. He said, Terry, we are trying to wrestle with what it means for a local church to sacrifice for the sake of the gospel going to the nations. And I'm like, what? What are we willing to do? And I know our mission pastor is here and she's taking notes. She's gonna go, Terry, this is what you said. What are we willing to do to reach the nations? That's our heart. I had, for a while, on my screensaver, it's a Craig Groeschel quote. It says, to reach the people we are not reaching, do you know the last of it? We have to do what we have not been doing. To reach the people we are not reaching, we have to do what we've not been doing. When we go home, there may be some things we have to either start doing that are uncomfortable or maybe stop doing. Our Alpha team, they came to us and they said, this was a good one. They said, hey, we've got some people. We think we should do Alpha pickleball. And I'm like, have you talked to the ER doctors? Because they say the most injuries they get is from pickleball. Like, we can't have that in our church. Grasshopper talk. Like, that's a liability. Grasshopper talk. Last weekend, people gave their lives to the Lord. They'd come play pickleball, go to Alpha, and our Alpha team says, Terry, you wouldn't believe it. We get people at that Alpha, and we've had big Alphas. We get people at that Alpha who would never come to any others. You have to start doing what you're not doing to reach the people you're not reaching. And what are we willing to do? We have a lot of conference enthusiasm. But then comfort kicks in. And you know already you're gonna have to have some difficult talks with somebody. You're gonna have some hard board meetings. To reach leaders, well, that's a budget. Darren's like, I'm like, our budget is due in 2 weeks. You just wrecked my budget planning. It puts us in discomfort. Joshua had a different spirit because he said, I'm gonna go where no one else is willing to go. He sacrificed comfort. But then he secondly sacrificed his timeline. And think about it. Because they didn't go in the wilderness, because they listened to the other 10, what happened? God said, you are going to wander in the wilderness for another 40 years, and this unbelieving generation is going to die. What does that mean for Joshua, or for Caleb and Joshua? He spent the next 40 years burying his friends. I was trying to calculate it. In 40 years, probably guess what there is, the unbelieving generation, probably 70 deaths a day. You know, when you look at like where Israel was wandering and how they kind of went in this small area, they couldn't go very far because they had to bury 70 people a day. They'd have to stop and dig their grave and bury them. He's watching his friends one by one by one. Now, if I was Caleb, I would say, I told you so. If you would have listened to me, you wouldn't be dying. My question is, did his wife die or did his wife see the land? That's the question I have. Some of you theological scholars, you can help me out at the end. Caleb had grit. He had more than just being optimistic. He had more than hope. He had grit because he had hope. He knew what he believed in and what he wanted to do. And imagine, like, everything that was going on, that it wasn't just 70 people dying a day, but all of a sudden there was that time when the snakes were attacking. There was that time when Korah's rebellion, the earth swallowed a bunch of people. They were trying to get rid of Moses. And here is Caleb. You never see him grumbling or complaining. You never see him being difficult to deal with. Why? Because I think he sacrificed his right to be bitter. He said, I have hope. All the other people, what? They want to go back to Egypt. Let's not stay here. Let's go back to the slavery and the bondage we have. Caleb said, I'm staying in the wilderness because I know what God has promised. And it's not my timeline. I wanted to take that hill 40 years ago, but this is God's timeline. And I'm willing to stay, and I'm willing to walk in it. And friends, we have to struggle so many times with that same wilderness. For all of us here, we're one of three situations. Either you are in good times and you're about to enter the wilderness, and we'll pray for you. Some of you are in the wilderness, and you know it. And some of you just came out. And one of the most difficult places to be is walking in the wilderness and trusting God, and trusting that even in the wilderness, God is working. It was 23 years ago. We had a hard time getting pregnant. My wife and I were finally pregnant. She was pregnant. And we were having twins born on Christmas Day. It was a great time. The church was growing that I was at in London. I was writing a book. The book publisher, this never happens, the book publisher hired an editor to help work with me on the book. Friends, I was on the fast track to what everybody wants as a comfortable pastor. And our twins were born 4 months premature. Our son died after 2 months. You can see my sweet daughter, Jenna. I'll talk about her more in a minute. Lots of physical challenges from being born premature. And friends, it was a wilderness. And there were times I need to leave ministry. I can't afford all this. I need another job. I need to do something. How can I do this? I'm wrestling with God myself through all this. How can I pastor people? Friends, the wilderness spared me and saved me. I was on the fast track to nowhere. I don't know where I would have been. I wouldn't be where I am now. And I had to trust God's timeline. And some of you are there. And you know what it is, Ministry, it is a wilderness right now. You look at the statistics. Here are just some. It says that in the last couple of years, 1 out of 4, 24% of us have said we want to quit, seriously thought about quitting. 24%. 40% of us feel lonely. This is pastors. This is Barna's survey of pastors. 40%, almost half. Like, look at the person next to you. One of you is lonely. One of you is dying of loneliness in ministry. And it's a wilderness. 67% have no close confidant outside of the church. No one to go and talk to. That when you're in the wilderness, who do you do that? See, and ask, how is it that Caleb was able to be so resilient and have that grit? 40 years of the wilderness, snakes, a pit opening up, having to eat manna. I think it was his friends, his mentors. There were only 2 people that made it through those 40 years with him, just 2. Moses and Joshua. And I think they pinpoint for us what it means to have a Caleb spirit that we need, friends. I think 2 kinds of mentors in our life. We need a Moses who is a leadership mentor. That Moses knew how to lead. That's how Caleb got in the first place. Moses said, if we're gonna launch a vision, we gotta send people out. We gotta send scouts out to do it. We need leaders. And the biggest mistakes I've made in my ministry have been because I thought, I'm sick and tired of all those leadership books. I just wanna get rid of them. And friends, it's hurt me every time when I'm not thinking about leadership. And secondly, there was Joshua. Now you may say, oh, Joshua, he's a leader. He brought people in. No. Joshua did not mentor, I don't think, in leadership. He mentored Caleb spiritually. Because what do we learn? In Exodus chapter 33, Moses and God, they're wrestling together. Moses should we go? Where do we go? God's like, well, you can go, but I won't go with you. And Moses is in and out of the tent of meeting, out of the Holy of Holies, meeting with God and getting wisdom. And what's it say in Exodus 33:11? Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And when Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, what does it say? Would not depart from the tent. Moses would go and do his leadership. Joshua said, hey, it's about relationship with God. It's about who he is. See, friends, we are mentored by the internet. We are mentored by the algorithm. And you're mentored. That's what gets us comfortable. We were laughing today. Oh, you know that site, Preachers and Sneakers? Have you seen that? All the high power preachers and all the clothes that they wear. All the preachers talking about what their life is. We are often mentored by the internet to comfort instead of being mentored by a leader and someone who's going to challenge us spiritually. And in my life, I've had balance, those 2. Who's going to help me lead well? Who is your leadership mentor? But if only you have a leadership mentor, you will forget about him because it's all about the leadership structure. Who is spiritually challenging you? When was the last time someone challenged you spiritually? A Caleb spirit is not a lone ranger. Why is there so much challenge? Why are people wanting to quit? 67% don't have someone to talk to. And please, we're going to have time of prayer. One of the things people were saying as our intercessors were praying is their incredible sense of loneliness, wanting to pray for friendships and mentors for people. Leave here with a friend. And because Caleb had such grit in the wilderness, he was ready. He was ready when God does the crazy thing after 40 years and finally takes them to the land. Notice what we read in Joshua chapter 14, verse 6. It says that Caleb, they had taken a lot of the land and they were ready to take more. And it says, then the people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God in Kadesh Barnea, concerning you and me? I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought him word again as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt, yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot is trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. Wholehearted. He's all in. And now behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years in the wilderness. And now behold, I am this day 85 years old. I'm still as strong today as I was in the day that Moses sent me. My strength now is my strength was then, for war and for going and coming. So give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day, for you heard on that day how the Anakim were there. Give me this mountain. Anybody 85? Do we have any 85-year-olds? Can you imagine? Here is Caleb, 85 years old, and he says, give me a mountain. See, we have to surrender our timeline, friends. Sometimes God is slower than what we want, and we get impatient. Sometimes God surprises us at the craziest moments. He was 85, and his faith and his trust and his belief in the promise kept him alive. His spirit of being wholehearted kept him alive. We can grow old. We can age, friends. But we don't have to grow old. We all have to age, but we don't have to grow old. We don't have to do that. Clint Eastwood was playing golf with a country singer. I can't remember his name now. And they were out playing golf, and it was going to be Clint Eastwood's 88th birthday. And so the country singer said, hey, Clint, what are you doing for your birthday? He says, oh, I'm traveling to this place to shoot my next movie. You're 88. How do you do that? And why are you doing that? How do you manage to stay that young? He says, Clint said, I get up every morning and I refuse to let the old man in. I get up every morning and I refuse to let the old person in. Darren, I think we need coffee mugs with that. Imagine getting up every morning. I refuse to let the old person in. See, our world tells us timelines. Our world tells us when we're done and what we should do. And you can retire. I'm not saying don't retire. What are you going to do with that? Because sometimes the Lord surprises us with his timeline. Are you ready? If God surprised you, are you ready? It was about a year ago this time. I was talking with Daryl. He's one of our contract workers. He does a lot of our video work at Bayview. If you go to our YouTube page, you see a lot of the results of what he's done. And he was telling me that his wife was still sick. His wife had been sick since 2019. She had had continual kidney failure, and her kidneys were failing fast. And she was about to go on dialysis. It gotten that bad. They tried for a kidney donor. Her mom tried 3 times, couldn't find a match. And so I'm like, oh, Daryl, I'm going to pray for you. So I was praying for Daryl. By the end of summer, August, she had tried dialysis, couldn't handle it, was no longer able to even be on dialysis. You cannot live very long with kidney failure and not on dialysis. And I started praying. I'm like, okay, God, I gotta pray. We gotta pray that Sarah gets a kidney. And God struck me in the head, because I said, he's not always gentle with me. And he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm praying, God. I'm praying for Sarah. Well, why are you praying? God, this is what I do. I pray, someone else answers the miracle, and then I tell a great story on a Sunday morning. It's worked for 40 years. And God said, why don't you be the answer? Well, I'm 65. I got a family. No, why don't you be the answer? Isn't it crazy how we pray prayers we can answer? God's like, you got 2 kidneys, you only need 1. So we had a family meeting back in September, and I started this journey. And I thought, oh, they'll kick me out. Okay, God, I will go ahead and I'll be tested, but I'm sure they'll find something wrong. I am glad to report, I, at 65, am amazing health. And last January, my wife, we had to go to final appointment, like we had to meet the social worker because they want to make sure that I wasn't crazy or anything. And they're like, oh, it'll be a few months away. Like, you mean June? Like, yeah, that'll probably be a good time. You mean General Assembly time? I'm like, can't do that. I said, I hate to be a jerk once again. And then about 2 days later, they called and they said, oh, we need you to go back for one more test, and we think surgery will be in about 10 days. 10 days. So I went back, had the test. Then they called, I had to go meet with the surgeon. And the surgeon said, yeah, everything kind of looks okay, except. I was like, I don't like except. You don't want surgeons saying except. They said, there's something on the scan of your 1 kidney. Not the kidney you're giving away, the one you're keeping. We don't know what it is. It's a little shadow. It could be a problem. Maybe it won't drain. Like maybe stuff will go in and it won't come out. I'm like, well, you can fix that, can't you? Well, we'll try. No, you can fix it. Well, we'll try. I said, oh, if this was the other kidney that I was donating and you put that, would you put that in Sarah? Oh, no. So I get the bum. I'm giving a kidney and I keep the bum. Well, there may be nothing. We don't know what it is. We could do a test where, trust me, it's not a test anyone would want, but it might not show us anything. And so I wrestle. I understand Israel wrestling with God and wrestle for like a night. Thought I came to a conclusion. I actually called the surgeon 3 times. One day, I'm like, I gotta talk to you again. And by the end of that day, God said, Terry, that is not your kidney. It's Sarah's kidney. I forgot to tell you that when I went in for that surgeon appointment, as I was going in, Sarah was coming out. She was all ready for surgery. She booked childcare for her kids. I can tell you, I was like, okay, God, I am trusting that's your voice. And I've never felt so at peace. In fact, I don't know, it's an old hospital. I don't know what happened. I did not get wheeled into the surgical room, into the OR. I walked in. I carried my little bag of saline, hopped up on the operating table myself. And I got it like the next, came out, kind of came to, like the next day, I'm like, I had a catheter in. I'm saying to my wife, is there urine there? Is it working? Is it coming out? She is back at work, doing fantastic. Her kidney numbers couldn't be better. I went 3 months ago, and my kidney numbers are better than anyone would ever expect for a surgery. Now, I don't say that to talk about me. What amazed me is what that did to our church. When people said, the pastor is taking a risk. The pastor is demonstrating faith. The pastor is doing what he calls us to do. Because don't we do that? Oh, give a faith offering. You done faith. Did they ever see us do that? No. And what kept Caleb alive was this promise, this mountain. He's going to do something. He's going to take it. God had given it. What is it? What is the mountain that you are praying and believing that God is going to give you? What is the mountain that you are asking your people to help go with? My mountain is that one day at Bayview, we have a 9 o'clock service. That 9 o'clock service will never end. The Holy Spirit breaks out. People just at 10:30 join us. People at 11:55 join it. I don't know how they'll do it because there won't be a seat. The parking lot would be crazy. But that God would just move in such a powerful way. What is your big, audacious prayer? That's Caleb. That's a different spirit. And if you don't have one, that's a problem. Because the writer of Hebrews says we should approach boldly. Jesus told stories of knocking at the door and asking boldly and saying, God, you gotta do this. Nothing drives me more crazy than visiting a small group, or even my small group sometimes. And kind of it gets to the prayer section, and everyone's like, yeah, it's kind of okay. I don't really have anything to pray. I don't have anything to, you don't have anything to pray. What are you knocking on the door of heaven? 40 years. Caleb was saying, God, you got to do this. God, you got to do this. What's he asking? I need to wrap up. The third thing is that he sacrificed a legacy. And I think the hardest sacrifice of all, you can sacrifice kind of one bold moment of not comfort. You can sacrifice waiting in the wilderness. But after you've accomplished everything, to give it away is absolutely crazy. And we read in Judges chapter 1, verse 12. Caleb it's kind of finally got the land. He's there. He's 85. Caleb said, I'm going to give my daughter access in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sephar. And Othniel, son of Kenaz, who later becomes a judge, Caleb's younger brother, took it. So Caleb gave his daughter Ashka to him in marriage. They're cousins. Okay, we'll just have to deal with that. They're cousins. And she asked him and one day when she came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. When she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, what can I do for you? She replied, do me a special favor. Since you have given me land in the Negev, also give me springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. So Caleb finally, after 40 years of grumbling and complaining people, he gets the land. And what does he do? He gives it away. He says, I want the next generation to have it. And I love that Achsah, talking to Othniel, we don't know who actually really talked to Caleb about, but she knew she could approach her dad and ask for anything. She knew what her dad was like. The younger generation knew they could go to the older generation and ask, and they would get help. Let me tell you, lead pastors, senior pastors, can your staff come to you, your younger staff, and ask anything? Is there a culture that you have that the next generation can come and say, hey, here's an idea, or here's what I'm doing, and they feel free to ask? They're not sheepish to be able to do that. And notice that Caleb gave them the land and then gives what? Gives the springs, gives the watering source. Like doesn't just say, okay, well, actually you can have them. Like if you want, I don't want to hear you talk anymore. Gives the best parts and helps flourish. Friends, this is what we're talking about. In order for us to be able to see new leaders in next gen, some of us, have to be able to sacrifice our legacy. And friends, that's hard because a lot of us have been holding on to things. A lot of us are holding on to our ministries. We're holding on to the way it was. We're holding on to our position. We don't have to give it up, but we have to just step back so the next generation can step in. And we have to be able to give them springs to be able to do that. Springs to be able to allow them to grow. And be able to step back so others can come enjoy what God wants to do. I came to this job at 62 years old. It was kind of crazy to even at 62 wanting to be a lead pastor. But I had some good models. I had a good model in my first church. When I was in London, I started as associate. And Richard was the senior pastor. And Richard, he had led significant churches in Winnipeg, in Chicago, and then in London. And we built a new building. And Richard had a beautiful office, a great view. We were about to move in. He said, "Hey, Terry, I don't want that. You take the better office. You take the senior pastor's office." He was still senior pastor. And then he said, "Hey, Terry, why don't you preach just a little bit more? You start preaching a bit more." And then he said, "Hey, you go and do this." And then at some point, he said, "Hey, I'm going to retire." He was about 60. He said, "I'm going to retire in about a year. I want you to take my place." And we worked with the board and the congregation. And he kind of decreased. It was like Jesus and John the Baptist. Like I was preaching once a month, him 3, then I preached 2 a month and him 2. And then by the end of that year, I was preaching 3 and he once. Never once did he ever question. Never once did he ever undermine people's loyalty. Never once did he do that. He sacrificed his right to his reputation and his legacy so that I could be there. And I have to tell you, I don't think of being Caleb. I think of being Richard. And I said, I came at 62 years old. It was absolutely crazy. Who hires a 62-year-old? Everybody's looking for the 40-year-old in skinny jeans with a podcast. I was 62-year-old with dad jeans, nervous tremors, and a search consultant who was geographically challenged. But you've met, you know Derek. You met Lizette, Minsu. We have the most amazing team. And there's something powerful about coming at 62, not 42. Because my job, friends, my job is that when it's time for me to retire, is that Bayview doesn't have to hire a geographically challenged search consultant. But there are a pipeline of people prepared and ready to go. And that there are leaders, and I can just step back because they've stepped in and they stepped in and they stepped in. And friends, some of us here, some of us have to lay down our legacy. Some of you holding on to it too tight. We are launching a campus in the new year, and we're launching in a building that this church is giving to us because 20 years ago, that church dropped the ball. They didn't invest in the next generation. They just kept doing things for themselves. Well, we got to protect our ministry. We got to protect the way it is. We got to protect our nice little comfort. And they're dead. There's 20 people left. That can't happen on our watch. And it's so easy to say, well, I'm protecting my pulpit. I'm protecting this ministry. Some of you have ministries that should have died a death decades ago. But we are too comfortable because we don't want to say no to someone who might not give as much. And to some of you young people, be patient. Some of you, you've got to lay down your frustration because it's about driving you nuts. It's hard to even look at your boss sometimes because you're like, why are they holding on so tight? Be patient. Consider it a wilderness. God will be with you. So I'm going to ask, what kind of spirit do you have? Because you have to remember, I'm the guy that wouldn't even pray about a job. I'm the guy that prays and then lets somebody else do it. I'm the guy that says a hard no. I'm a guy who can love comfort. But that's not where we came from. We came from Simpson crying on the streets, looking for those who needed Jesus and bringing them in. We came from a legacy of missionaries who piled everything into their coffin and went overseas, not thinking that they will ever come back. And they did it because they knew who Jesus was. They did it because they took God at his word. They did it because they knew what God had called for them. And I wrote this down, and I don't want to miss it. I said, when did we stop believing that? When did we buy a version of comfortable churchianity that costs us nothing, produces nothing, and looks nothing like the founding of our movement? Caleb wrecks me. 85 years old, 4 decades of waiting, giant still in the land, and his response is, give me that mountain. Not someday, but now. There's something in that man I want desperately, and I think you want it too. It's not willpower, it's not personality. It is what happens to a human being when they have chosen God over comfort so many times that God becomes more real than the giants do. Let me read that again. It's what happens to a human being when they have chosen God over comfort so many times, God becomes more real than the giants do. In Caleb, he's just a shadow of the new and greater Caleb that was to come, Jesus. The one who sacrificed his life for people, the one who laid down his reputation, his comfort, his timeline. For people who were like us, we're not worth it. We were not worth it by any calculation. Caleb is the shadow of the one who said, not my will, but yours, God. Caleb is the shadow of the one who endured the cross because of the joy set before him. What was that joy? The joy is that lost people would come home. See, Jesus endured the cross for the joy. He wasn't thinking of the sacrifice. He was thinking of the benefit. See, we choose comfort in the short term, which often always gets us in trouble. Jesus said, I'm going to choose discomfort for the joy that is to come. Death didn't have the last word. Satan didn't have the last word. The faithfulness of God who raised Jesus from the dead, he is the last word. And if that is true, any giants we're going to face when we leave here and go back home, any giants that seem so daunting in our world, they don't have the last word either.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you were encouraged today. If you have any questions about Jesus, the Bible, or Heritage Park Alliance Church, please visit our website, hpac.org, where you can get connected.